Welcome to the Regroup Hour, the podcast that's all about how we make and manage change by building a bedrock of self-care. Self-care that comes from self-awareness and self-compassion. This is a gentle hour-ish to take some time out for yourself, to simply be and see whatever this time brings. It truly is an opportunity to regroup. I recorded this conversation with Susan just before Christmas, so it was actually during the most recent lockdown in the UK. And we had met through a mutual connection and just spotted that we really liked each other. And I was fascinated with the way that Susan works with women and supports them through what she calls embodied movement. She's a mindful movement teacher and guide, and she's the creator of a gorgeous group on Facebook, which is called The Age of Becoming. And it's all about embodied practices empowering women who are over 50. She's a near black belt instructor, and she teaches embodied awareness to people of all abilities and experiences. And one of the things that I really loved about the way that she speaks about movement is how inclusive she is. So although she specializes in working with women, I think is relevant to all of us. And she's also a writer. She comes from a background of words, actually. And I found when we were having the conversation that it became quite difficult to work out who was actually interviewing who. So you'll even hear it right from the start. It's actually Susan who starts off asking me some questions. So that was a lovely interplay, and hopefully you enjoy the conversation that we had. And here's Susan. Take care.
Hello. Well, it is. It's a pleasure to see you and to have some time to talk to you. I love the sort of. Somebody asked me recently, has anything happened to you recently that has made no sense at all, but made all the sense in the world? And the thing I wrote in my journal was Henny.
Oh.
Like, it made no sense at all that we would meet. Being you're over in the UK and I'm here, and and yet it made all the sense in the world. So it is a delight to have some time with you to talk.
Oh God, I so resonate with that. And that well, as I said to you before we started recording, that thing that I've mentioned you to a number of people that I work with who are kind of, who I would term healers in some sense, you know, the way that they work with others and support others and enable growth and change. And there's that, that sense when you meet somebody and you go, oh, I get you. But also within that, it's the, oh, you get me.
Mm-hmm.
You see me?
Mm-hmm.
Always feels
Yeah.
like a very generous gift that way.
So one of the things that I am interested in is in regards to your work with women going through various stages of menopause is how you came to that and your own story. In that it sounds much different than mine, although I would just love to hear that. I would just love to hear more about that.
So I think my menopause story started a lot longer ago than I thought it had. And it actually took quite a bit of reflection and took doing the work that I do with other women, supporting them through their menopause, for me to really see all the different kind of markers that there were in my own menopause. And it took me a while to remember that I'd actually gone to the doctor probably when I was about 40, maybe even 39, and said, I think I'm in perimenopause, not actually knowing what it was, to be honest, but kind of knew the term and just knew it meant before. And lovely doctor, very nice woman, much younger than me, didn't have a clue, told me I was too young, said I was probably working too hard. I think she was right. I was working too hard. But on reflection, I was definitely in perimenopause. And so what happened was that I left that conversation and just saw I'm going a bit mad then. And do you know what, Susan? Something I hadn't reflected on until quite recently is I had an experience when I was at university where I was really ill and kept going back to the doctor and saying, there's something wrong. I don't know what's wrong. And the doctor just kept saying, you've got a bladder infection, or, you know, but nobody ever actually examined me. They just fobbed me off. And I ended up dropping out of university for a year because I was so unwell. And I think systemically, I had a repeated pattern of that I was talking to doctors, but not getting any response. And I don't say this in any way to disrespect doctors because they do an incredible job, of course. But that was, so there was that playing out for me. And then we had quite a few really difficult personal things happen, including my mother died after a lengthy illness, and I then got really submerged in work. And with all of that, menopause was kind of impacting more and more. And eventually I ended up having pneumonia 3 times in a year.
Wow.
Because my whole body was just screaming, will you stop? Will you listen? Please. Will you care for me?
Yes, yes.
And I was taking painkillers every day. I ached, my whole body ached constantly. Terrible backache, joints. I'd put on a lot of weight. So I'm now about 4.5 stone lighter than I was.
Which for the listening audience in the United States, a stone is, do you know how many pounds a stone is? Is it like 6 pounds?
No, it's like more than that. It's 2.5 kilos. Hang on. Oh my God, I'm really rubbish with numbers. Is it like 14 pounds in a stone? Like it was a lot.
Okay, so we'll just say that. Let's just say that. We don't need any numbers.
Yeah, I put on a lot of weight, you know, without knowing why.
Yeah.
And the third bout of pneumonia, I nearly died. I mean, it really ended up in hospital, isolation suite, had sepsis, another bug that was trying to shut down all my internal organs and everything. It was awful. And you know what? I was in hospital with my work phone answering emails, and
wow.
So
right. And so this is something so huge, this issue of listening to the language of the body, listening to the wisdom of the body, which we are so trained to ignore. And that you were doing exactly what we're trained to do, which is to soldier through and push over and buck up. Yeah. Stiff upper lip, what?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, being British, obviously, very good at doing stiff upper lip. Yeah, and also concealing and suppressing and yeah, and really, really wanting to demonstrate that I was okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I come across a lot of women who are like, no, it's fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. And as soon as there's this little kind of gerbil kind of twitching that happens, and I'm always like, oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't buy that at all. And when I heard some of your story, I started to look back on my own perimenopause. I'm postmenopause now, but I was just struggling, right? I found myself sort of struggling emotionally, struggling with, even though I'm a mindful movement teacher, struggling with connecting to my body as it was changing and all of this stuff. And I did not kind of give it any credence, or I didn't really acknowledge, as you were talking about, that this was part of what was happening, because I can see now coming through the other side. It's like, oh wow, like that was a difficult 7-10 years of feeling not myself and feeling struggle's just the word that comes. So yeah.
I think there's part of the challenge with it is that it creeps up on us, so we adapt. We're particularly when we're doers, we fall up into our heads and we use our wit and our intelligence to navigate the difficulties that we're experiencing. So we compensate for loss of confidence, for example, by being really
overdoing
it.
Yeah.
And and so all of these things, like, I think for me, one of the biggest things was like being out of balance. I was going to say we're coming out of balance, but to be honest, I'm not sure how in balance I was. Do you know what? I'm also this thing about when I was at university. I actually think I'm having a little bit of a moment here, actually, Susan. I actually think there is a direct connecting point between those two experiences. And pre that, I think I probably was in my body and trusted my body much more. I mean, I still had sort of body issues during puberty and stuff, like self, sort of perception issues. But I think that thing about trusting what we're hearing, we become so used, because like you said, we're trained to suppress.
Right. And we're trained to trust an expert over an expert. And I'll use like the air quotes, that the doctor says it's not this, so the doctor is right, and my own sense of myself is not. And yeah, right. And I say that to people all the time, is that experts are great. Doctors and trainers and all kinds of people who have wonderful expertise, and I recommend going to them, but not turning over our own agency with ourselves and our own trust of what we know, literally, I guess, in our bones, right? And
just I've seen that a lot with clients, where particularly it's sort of what led me to do this specific aspect of the work I do around menopause, because I realized that probably 70% or even 80% of the women that I had as clients, at some point during our conversation, there was something that came up which made me go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm sensing menopause, like in my body. As I listen to you, I'm sensing menopause. And so I would, in whatever way felt relevant and appropriate, I would raise it. And so often the response was, to your point, I went to the doctor, I was told I was too young, or my hormone levels were okay when they tested them, so it's definitely not that. And then I have learned to trust my own body, both in response to myself and the people that I work with, and just say, you know, if you're feeling something, you're feeling it.
Right.
It's not in someone else's hands to tell you it's
That's
not
right.
true.
Yes, that is so right. And it's amazing how deeply entrenched those um, those habits or those tendencies are, even with highly accomplished, maybe even particularly with highly accomplished, highly intelligent, highly effective women, that that there is really this long held pattern of distrust, or I must be wrong. I must be wrong somehow, that it's not what I think, or it's not what I feel, more to the point. And I think you're right. I love your point about adaptability, that and I think we're seeing this so much now. We're recording this during the COVID crisis, and that's been going on for quite some time, several months now. And right, we start to see people, what might have felt like it was impossible or intolerable in February last year, now is something that we have adapted to. And in my experience, adaptability is one of a human being's greatest gifts and greatest downfalls, right? It's like we are so adaptable, and that's what allows us to survive, and in times it allows us to thrive. And yet it's the incremental adaptability that then suddenly we find ourselves so far off course. Like, how did I end up here? And yeah, it's like one little choice and one little adaptation at a time, right? Yeah.
So that thing there then about that being conscious of the inner experience and what we're feeling and honoring it. So I think that was something that I just didn't do, was honor my own experience. I'm curious, what most supported you during your menopause? What?
I think that a couple of things. As a movement teacher, physical movement, but mindful physical movement, coming back to that over and over again. That was true before menopause, and it's true after that. I am reminded over and over again about how helpful it is to move without expectation, without the Fitbit or the ticker on the elliptical machine, without any kind of goal necessarily, other than being in the body, right? And I as an overachiever, I want, like, oh, I walked 5 miles, I've got my numbers. But what really supports me is moving in such a way that is allowing my body to guide me. So that is over and over again huge. And it's crazy. After teaching for 20 years, you would think that would be hardwired at this point, but still I forget. I've been working at my desk and I sort of feel crappy, and why do I feel so crappy? Oh, right. I haven't been in here. I haven't been in my skin. I haven't been in here. So that is absolutely one thing that helped me a lot. Meditation helped me a lot. Another version of mindfulness, another version of being in the body, but quieter, which is very challenging for me and my busy doing self, but tremendously helpful and insight giving, and not always easy, not always peaceful, but very illustrative is a meditation practice. And I would say the third thing that helped me the most was asking for help. Is not isolating myself, not thinking I had to do it all on my own, not shoving it down or pretending it wasn't happening, not stiff upper lipping it, right? And all three of those things, they're all challenging to do, but they were definitely the things that helped me the most. Yeah.
Reaching out, one of the things that I've written about is, well, writing was one thing that really
Right.
helped me.
Yeah.
So journaling and writing, but one of the things was being willing to accept and listen to and be open to the support of others actually enabled me to listen to and accept and be open to the support that I could bring myself. I definitely felt there was this correlation between like an external and an internal opening. Because there's something about that, when we're closed and we're holding ourselves stiff. And there was a word that my husband used about me, which was brittle, that I'd become brittle. And that's one of my trigger points that I observe in others. Often the thing that we've experienced is the thing that we are able to support others with. Getting support and also learning became a really big thing for me as well. Expanding my knowledge, and because I felt as though I was losing connection with my brain. I felt like I'd lost words, lost confidence, had lost clarity of thought, but actually finding purpose and then learning around that was really useful too. And I'm sure there's a correlation there.
Sure. And for me, one of the things that I really love to do is connect my intellectual or curiosity exploration with an embodied experience, right? So for example, you were talking about rigidity. We know from the body that if it is being held rigidly or in a brittle way, that it's very it's susceptible to breaking. And if it's over flexible, if it's hyper flexible, like I can do anything, it's also very susceptible to injury and being harmed. And so what I love to do is, as I learn things in my mind, in my intellect, to then say, well, what does that feel like in the body? So what does it feel like to move in a brittle way or in a hyper flexible way? What does it feel like? And what does it feel like to find a place of connection? That's one of the words you used, right? Is what does it feel like to move in a way that feels with clarity? And for me, these are two essential sides of our own embodiment of our experience and our own trust of our own bodies and our own minds and our own experience, right? And our culture is so enamored with the information, right? We have this idea that if we have the information, we're good to go. We got the information. But if that was the truth, we all have the World Wide Webs that we carry around in our pockets and all the information we would ever need. And yet there isn't the connection. There isn't that embodiment.
And in fact, there's
And
a disconnection the more.
right. And so, so I love that. I love the idea. I often have used journaling and writing as part of the practices that I do with people, in that, yes, let's take all of those thoughts and put them on the paper, and then what does it feel like to feel them and move in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You're triggering sort of thoughts for me, actually, because I think one of the things for me was, I know we talked at one point about what are some of the other like tools that are really useful for supporting us as we go through menopause, and one is around nutrition, and so that was a massive thing for me. But the shift was that I heard myself. I worked with a nutritionist. I accepted support, opened up, allowed somebody in, and she asked me, "What is it that you want?" And all of my life, I would have said to be thinner. And in that moment, out of my mouth came the words, "I want to be strong."
Oh, wow.
And I actually, there was like internally, I did a bit of a, who said that? What? Huh? Do I? Right. Okay, we'll go with this then. And that has underpinned all of the nutritional changes that I've
Wow.
made. So it's actually been nothing to do with food.
Right.
And
Right.
everything to do with the body.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. So that has, I totally think that is your body was like, I've got an opening here, and
Yeah.
I know what she wants to say, but that's not what I want her to say. Right, and that's utterly different.
Yeah.
That is an utterly different answer, and instead of taking up less space, right? Instead of shrinking, holding space and being able to hold yourself and others, and having that kind of strength. And again, I think that we are often trained that strong means hard, like tough. But we know from the body that real strength, true strength, is soft and pliable and adaptable, and all of that. Yeah. And I think nutrition is such a great example. Like movement, we all need it, and we all can get information about it, and we have to listen to what our unique bodies and selves really thrives with. What feels really good, what feels good before, during, and after, and
I also realized, as an outcome of actually listening to the nutritionist, because that's the other thing that is, particularly when we're used to being right, very, very easy to get the advice and then go, yeah, I'm not sure, because you don't actually know me that well. I think I know myself, actually. And then still being led by that fear or the ego or the whatever the stories. And so I actually decided I would listen to this woman who was an expert and did know what she was talking about. And I decided to trust her. And trust is a really major word, I think. And where I came to, my shorthand for everything that I ended up doing was that I chose to eat food that loves me. And it became really simple. And I could easily make a discerning, love-based choice not a rejecting denial of something.
Restriction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
restriction, but a love base. Oh, well, that's something that loves me. So I'll eat that.
And so what did that, in a really practical way, what did that look like? Does that mean that you would be looking at the food in your refrigerator and say, uh, just getting an intuitive feeling, or how did you make those choices on a day-to-day basis?
So there were things that she recommended to me because of my physiology and because of the symptoms that I had. And it's really interesting, actually, because I don't think we talked about menopause when I had the conversation with her. But I know now that so many of what she was observing in me was actually to do with menopause. And I will go back and check with her whether it was something that she consciously clocked or just intuitively knew. But anyway, but things like the aching joints, really foggy head. She went in and was sort of saying, okay, so when does this happen? When is it worse? When is it better? And she identified that gluten was really not serving me. Cow dairy was not serving me. Sugar, no big surprises, was not serving me. And also I've been vegetarian for 30 years, so have had like a long reliance on pasta and rice and potatoes, not serving me. Because my whole body, because we come into menopause and our physiology, it's not just our hormones, and it's everything shifts, like our energy shifts, our willingness to compromise shifts, like everything changes. And
Yes.
so just going, okay, well, that's changed. It's not like a morning of like, I can't have pasta anymore, which I could have done. I could have done that. But instead I just went, it doesn't love me anymore.
Right.
I'm sorry, pasta. Like, our relationship, it's not you. Actually, it is you. You just don't love me enough. So I'm moving
Yes.
away.
You used to love me. You used to love me, but our
Yeah,
relationship has shifted.
our relationship has shifted. And actually that's a really beautiful, it's like boundaries, isn't it? How we build boundaries
Exactly.
with people, with behaviors. We can build them with food too, in a
Exactly.
beautiful way.
Yeah. I mean, and the same could be said for lots of things. It could be said for movement, right?
Mm.
That what I did in my 20s and 30s really was great, and it doesn't work for me now. The higher impact things, I in some ways do more strength building, but I do it very differently than I did when I was younger, right? Yeah, everything shifts. I like that. Um and I really appreciate what you're saying about trust. It's sort of a both and. It's this paradoxical thing, right? That to find someone, an expert that I trust, allows me to experiment and then learn to trust myself, right? Yeah, this balance. And instead of sort of just giving over my power to somebody who I have decided knows more than I do and just
Agency.
doing whatever,
Mm.
or saying, oh, you don't know anything, and pasta it is.
Yeah, which is so, I mean, my God. So one of the questions that I ask clients pretty often, actually, at the beginning of a coaching sort of relationship is, are they willing? Are they willing to make the change? And quite often they'll then spin into yeah, but I just don't know how. And it's like, well, the how we don't need to worry about. It's just, are you willing? Because when we have that, everything actually is possible. And I think because it's something you said, actually, this thing about in the body where strength is actually softness. And so for me, I think it's where our work meets in this lovely place. Actually, it's a place of softness and gentleness, but in a place of deep power, deep connected to self, love.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the awareness of the interconnections in my body, that true strength is not in a particular muscle, right? It's in the systemic quality that we move with, that we carry ourselves with, and choose with, yeah, and connect with, right, with people outside, with the world around us. um, and I think that your question to clients is an essential one. Like, are you willing to change? Are you willing to experiment and maybe have something not go as great as you thought, and not see that as a failure, but see that as an information gathering adventure, and then allows you to discern more clearly next time. And habit is a huge deal for human beings, and there is a reason that we are such habitual creatures, that our brains are wired in a lot of survival mechanisms to make it take less energy to do things out of habit. And yet the willingness to shift that and see what might serve us better is tremendously
And
essential when sort of the ground, as you say, everything's shifting. And so if we don't shift with it, we'll it won't work.
yeah, I think there's something here as well about how quickly we can get into habitual thinking. So back to your point about how adaptive we are, that we then come into this a bit. I mean, I've noticed it myself with lockdown. So in the UK right now, we're in our second lockdown. I mean, it's a very strange thing because there are lots of reasons why people aren't in lockdown, but anyway, mostly. Like the how habituated we've got with, not hugging people, not or making sure it's always like, put a mask on. And so these sort of habits, they're very quick to form. And in the same way, when we go through any kind of big life stage change, whether that's grief or loss of parents, so we become orphans, but in our adult years, or menopause, or for men, when testosterone levels drop, like all of these things, we can become incrementally habituated to feeling a certain way about it. And it's only when we just sort of, it's like we have to come into a place where it's like, oh, like this is different, this is uncomfortable, I feel unusualized, and that's okay. Like, comfort in the discomfort is part of, certainly in the work that I do, with the coaching, with the conversational sort of work, is comfort in the discomfort, and being like, and getting to a point where it's like, oh, that feels really uncomfortable. Like, like that,
Right.
it becomes like a really great thing, doesn't it? Because you become so comfortable with it. But when you're first starting out and making those shifts, man, I was resistant.
Yeah.
Like, I knew best. I knew up in my head, I knew best. And what I needed to learn was to come into my body and just let her speak.
Right. And one of the distinctions I make uh, with my participants often is the distinction between awkwardness and pain.
Oh, I love
So
that.
if we talk about movement or habits, something being awkward is great. It is rewiring the way our brains and bodies work, and it's actually the sensation of learning. That's what it feels like to learn something, is that awkward feeling. But pain is different, right? Pain is the body mind telling us that something is not right and not okay and not advisable, right? And making that distinction. So searching out the awkward, that I sometimes call it the oogie feeling, like, whoa, that feels weird. And allowing that to be a good sign and not a negative thing. And feeling the possibilities in that, and not the resistance against it. Right. I sometimes make the distinction between learning and practicing. Right. So when we're learning something, there is that feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing, or I feel like I'm flailing, or I keep messing up or whatever. And then once we've done that for a while, then we're practicing and it feels less awkward. It feels more like now we're kind of burning those pathways deeper. And but it takes courage. It does take that willingness.
Well, also because when we're when I think about kind of physical movement, so often that is trained out of us as well, that we're trained that unless you are elegant and graceful, and perform the ballet step perfectly, darling, at the age of 4, then you're some way a failure. And so that really resonates, that thing about being willing to feel awkward, or to feel that the discomfort of the body. But that whole thing around pain as well is about understanding the sort of psychological safety, just as understanding the physical safety. So being endlessly tender towards ourselves, actually. I think it's that, again, it comes back to this thing about listening in and just think, okay, so what's the kind thing that I can do here? And whether that's an internal emotional or mindset shift, or
I just want you to say that again. Endlessly tender.
endlessly tender.
Endlessly tender. I think I might have that tattooed to the inside of my arm.
Oh.
But that's what it is. I mean, that's really showing up for ourselves, right? It's like, and so your book is called My Darling Girl, right? And it's like that. Oh, my darling girl. Oh, here you are in this situation. How can we be tender with this? Whatever it is, even if it's rage, right? Even if it's joy or excitement, but how can I hold that in a way that is responsive and kind?
There's one of them it's just resonated for me. There's one, it would help if I actually had a copy of the book here, which I haven't, but anyway, there's something about that fear, they're like little birds, and they fly around us, but it's when they come to settle, and then we can bring our love to them, and they tuck their heads beneath their wings and will rest. It's this idea, like even the things that we're most afraid of, when we bring our our most compassionate self to it, then they settle, and I used to think of myself as a like a self-care specialist. Like that was kind of like the easiest way I had of describing what I do. And over the last few days, I've come to realize it's love. It's just love. That's that. And when I look across the work that I do with people one-to-one, I think that is the deepest work.
Right. Well, I think there's such a trend. I hear it often from coaches and, advisors and stuff. And they say things like, if you have a voice in your head that's telling you that you're doing it wrong and who do you think you are and you've messed it up again, that you should tell that voice to just shut up and go away. Right? I know. I see your head's exploding. My head explodes every time I hear somebody say that. And I love this image of the bird. It's like I call that voice in my head, I call her Pointy Girl. Oh, Pointy Girl. Oh, she's so afraid that she's just pointing out in sharp ways. But exactly as you say, if I hold her with tenderness, if I hold that part of me that is so afraid of being criticized or rejected or left out, and that's why she's yelling and screaming and making all the noise. But if I just give her, let her sit on my lap and and hug her, and she settles down. And she can actually be a tremendous ally.
Oh, because that's why she's there. And
Exactly.
she's there because somewhere down the line, her fierceness, her pointiness, it had a purpose. And these parts of us are tender parts. And I have come to see that any act of aggression internally to any part of us is an act of aggression.
Yeah, it's an act of violence.
And when we bring something hard up against something hard, you get a bang, you get an explosion, you get a hard outcome. Whereas I don't know if you've ever done it, but when you mix corn flour, I don't know what do you call it?
Cornstarch. We call it cornstarch.
With water.
Yes.
And it becomes a liquid solid. So
yes.
For me, you bash that cornstarch with the liquid and it's a hard thing. You rest your hand on it.
Sink right in.
And
right.
There you go. And there you are. It's all about the softness. And it's not it's funny actually. I used to so I have a long corporate career behind me, and one of my favorite sayings, Susan, I'm slightly embarrassed to say, was, if you want something doing, start a fight.
Oh my gosh.
That was how I operated.
Gosh.
Yeah. Still with a smile on my face. And, and I was never, I tried not to be like horrible, but I had this thing of like, you want something to do, you start a fight.
Pointy. Get pointy.
Get pointy.
Yeah.
Get in there, kick it off, throw the grenade. Now let's see what's going to happen.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you make change happen, Susan.
Holy moly.
Holy
okay.
moly. Yeah.
And destruction. Right. And then, so this is what's so interesting is that you and I are both working with women, and we're seeing the differences between feminine power and feminine leadership and feminine showing up and masculine. And I'm actually saying that not about men and women, but about that all of us have both in us, and our culture for freaking what, centuries, millennia, has put the emphasis on masculine approach. That's the masculine approach, is throwing the grenade and standing back with your arms crossed saying, all right,
Yeah.
I've done some good work here.
Yeah. Come on, people. Yeah.
Right? And and the feminine way is the opposite of that, right? One of the things that they're finding about, I'm sure you know about this in the nervous system, that we've all heard about fight and flight, when our lizard brain gets triggered. But women, when our that fear center gets triggered, one of the things that we do is tend and befriend, is that we make connections. And that is that in the body, there is fascia, connective tissue, which early people who were dissecting the human body would slice through it and throw it away. But in fact, it's what holds everything together. It's what makes everything work. Our organs, our bones, our joints, our muscles are all dependent on connective tissue. And that's the feminine energy, is that it's what holds everything together, and in this pliable, beautiful, soft way.
It's like mycelium, mycelli? Oh, what's it called? You know, the underground, the interconnectedness.
Oh, yes, like mushrooms.
Mushrooms.
Yes.
Celli, I think.
Yeah.
But and how that, how beautiful that is represented.
Right. It's not the big dramatic. It's not the big dramatic oak tree growing up. It's this network that's underground and life-giving. Yeah.
What a big surprise. We're actually sort of directly connected to nature in some way.
Shocking. Who knew?
Who knew? Oh.
So, so your book is coming out. Is it out now?
It comes out at the middle of December, 15th of December.
So exciting. So exciting. And where can we get it?
So it's through a publisher who's got their own like online bookstore called shookbop.com.
Okay.
I think it's shookbop.
All right. We'll get that information, because
the other way around. And yeah, it's felt like the easiest thing I have ever kind of given birth to, if you sort of mean, in that sense. And yet, when I look back at each one of those pieces of poetry, oh God, what that sort of moment was obviously not easy, but the actual creation of the book has been really flow.
Yeah. Right. That integration of the challenge and the art that came from it, right? Yeah. That's beautiful. That's so exciting. Well, I look forward to that, that day when that book arrives in my mailbox.
Oh, so where are we at now? I feel like
we've wandered about.
We've wandered. Yeah, beautiful. I suppose there was one thing that we haven't yet talked about, which I thought would be really lovely. I felt her presence a few times during the conversation, and that's the crone. I just feel like maybe we need to bring the crone in, and perhaps
tell me about the crone.
Okay, so I used to believe that menopause meant being over the hill, being wizened, being lined, being crooked backed, and in some way diminished in my body. And so that word crone, then, that's what it would have meant. And now I think I'm going to say, I think I am more beautiful now than I have ever been.
Yeah.
And anyone can hear that on whatever level they want. But for me, that when I see myself in the mirror, rather than scowl, which is what I used to do, and pull these terrible faces at myself and hate myself, now I look in the mirror and I see the crone. I see, woman. I see woman in her own body and happy with who she is. And that for me is what the crone actually is. The crone is also wisdom.
Sure.
I have a book here which I highly recommend to anybody. I don't know if you've
Crohn's
come
don't
across it.
whine.
Crohn's don't whine. Have you come across her before?
No, I haven't.
This book, I ordered it, online, and it took weeks to arrive, and then I realized why, and it's actually come from Canada. And it is a beautiful articulation of what it is to be a woman in postmenopausal years. So I think the other aspect about menopause as well is so endings and beginnings are incredibly important. We've touched on endings and beginnings quite a few times through this. But it's also, menopause is not simply an ending of our fertile years. It is this incredible awakening time too, if we choose it to be.
Right.
Which doesn't discount how hard a phase, how hard a transition it is for so many women. I mean, those difficulties are real, absolutely real. But it's also about remembering that we come through this like the butterfly coming out of the chrysalis. We come through this time into.
Yeah, the grief of any major shift is real. One of the things that I am noticing about myself is a feeling of being unapologetic. You said something when you were saying that everything is shifting. It's like what we're willing to put up with, what I have been willing to say, oh, it doesn't matter, whatever, finding my own voice, my own boundary, with myself and with others is a big part of what I've noticed. And what I sense in myself and in other people who have gone through menopause from that perspective of taking this as not only a loss, but as a gaining of wisdom, of experience, of what's next, is that feeling of relaxed in my own self, that sense of presence, of that I'm not like trying to get out of the way, and I'm not trying to be too big, like I'm not trying to be overly big. I'm not throwing the grenades.
I don't need to start a fight.
I'm telling the truth, and trusting, all of that, and that is, it's very powerful. And I like the idea of shifting our vision of the crone. There's a there, I don't know if you guys did you guys have Bugs Bunny, the cartoons, when you were growing up?
Mhm.
There was a witch character in Bugs Bunny that was this like sort of combination fat, skinny, just big nose, kinky, what do you call it, like wiry hair. And when she would run across the room, like her hairpins would fly out all over the place. And I remember that was my image of the crone, that I'm going to be both, I'm going to be ugly in all ways. Right? And just, cackling and all of that. And now I'm like you, saying, wait, there is possibility here that has never been possible in my life before. A possibility um, of both strength and softness, of dignity and presence and deep tenderness and love that I think maybe I didn't have the confidence to embody before, right? That's what I am interested in talking to people about, moving.
The word that arises for me there is respect.
Mm.
Sense of, true, deep respect. And I think if that's one thing that I would have wanted my younger self and my my menopausal self and my future self to remember is, that, because with respect, actually true respect, there is no hierarchy.
Yes.
So we respect others in exactly the same way that we respect ourselves, and we respect ourselves in exactly the same way that we respect others. And we also anticipate the respect of others. And that lands us in a really, that thing, that weighted belly place of, I am present, and I am okay, and I am enough, and I'm not too much. And sometimes I might be too much, and that's okay. And sometimes I might be a bit small, and that's okay. But it's like, I'm okay.
Yeah. 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 And it's not something, those aren't qualities that I think come quickly. I find it, or at least for our generation, perhaps younger women will come to those qualities sooner, perhaps. But for me, it feels like I had to live through a certain number of things. I had to live through a certain number of disappointments and grief and excitement and joy, and that's the alchemy of life, right? And so that feeling of presence and respect, I like that too. That non-hierarchical respect is something that's hard won. Yeah.
You're right. This thing of that respect is hard won, and how it takes time. And so maybe that's the final kind of part of this whole conversation, really, is that we can't rush any of this. I think that's one of the things that I see with clients, where people are, myself included, I know, we're so used to moving from A to B, without going past all the other, well, A to Z, without going past all the other letters of the alphabet. And so often in life it serves as well. But with this, you just need to go through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Such a joy to talk to you. I could talk to you all day.
Okay. Me too. I'm I'm curious when we play it back to see the breadth of topics.
Yes.
Thank you.
We traveled many miles.
We traveled many miles. Perfect. Thank you, Susan. That's brilliant. Well, what a wonderful conversation that was. I am so grateful to Susan for sharing all of her wisdom and her enthusiasm for life, actually, and her ability to see things from different perspectives. And as I said in the show notes, I really feel that this whole conversation is applicable regardless of the gender that you identify with, regardless of the life stage that you're in. If you're in a place in your life right now where change is knocking, where, you know, there's stuff coming up for you, then all of these principles around really paying attention to what's going on in our bodies and not disconnecting from the neck down, which is something, you know, that as we've talked about on the show before, we so often do as a form of self-protection, then, you know, I really hope that what we've discussed has resonated with you too. So, as ever, thank you so much. Thank you to you for listening. Thank you to Susan for being such a gorgeous guest, and thank you for Angus at Chango Music for your support and your encouragement along the way. All right, and I send you a hug and a wave.